All right, perfect. It's nice to have you on. Jonathan, I wondered if you could introduce yourself first to my class.
Sure. Hi. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Marra. I'm an expert clinical trial manager at Novartis Pharmaceuticals, but prior to that, I worked at Columbia University doing clinical trials, but more in academia, specifically in pediatric neuromuscular disorders like muscular dystrophy, spinal muscular atrophy, things like that. I am a MSU alumni, so Dr. Thomas was my calculus teacher, and she actually made me love math again. I wish I had someone like you earlier on in my academic development, because I would have liked math sooner than I did. But I liked your approach. This is a shameless plug, right? I liked your approach because it wasn't just about learning calc for the sake of calc, but practical applications for using calc. How can calc help in your day-to-day life or in your profession? So adding an extra tool under your belt. And I really appreciated that approach. So thank you, Dr. Thomas, for
Thanks for that. I really think that math is not boring. And then we take it into the classroom and we make it boring. And I've never figured out why we do that.
Right. No, absolutely. So I always appreciated your approach. I remember telling my brother, who was a math major at MSU, and I said, I wish I had this years ago. It would have changed my outlook and my perspective on math. But so thank you for that.
Good.
So that's just a quick summary of where I come from, my background. It's been primarily in clinical research. So whether on the academic side, working with patients directly, or now on the industry side, working more on a high level platform in terms of executing clinical trials, designing clinical trials, overseeing clinical trials in trial oversight, trial management.
So our class talked about clinical trial dropouts, and we thought of it as just one variable, the percentage of patients that drop out, or the number of patients that drop out. But you and I were talking earlier, and there's more to it than just that. There's other variables that are connected to the first variable, which is the number of patients that might drop out. Could you give some examples of how that would be connected to another variable?
Sure, absolutely. I think as a general principle, risk mitigation when it comes to potential dropouts is always a big thing when it comes to clinical trial design. By its very nature, sometimes the disease itself that you're testing will dictate or tell you what kind of a dropout you're expecting. So if it's a cancer study, you can anticipate a certain dropout rate. If it's a pediatric study, you can anticipate at times, depending on the disease you're studying, you can anticipate a certain other type of dropout rate. For healthy volunteer studies, it may be a little trickier because there are more factors that may be involved. Sometimes the design of the study itself can be detrimental in terms of the dropout rate. So if a study is very complex, the inclusion criteria is very stringent, that can lead towards a higher dropout rate, and that'll lead towards protocol amendments to be implemented. So changes to the protocol in order to adjust for that dropout rate. If you're looking at comparing, let's say you're testing a drug, and you're looking at comparing your drug to an industry standard, to the gold standard, something that's out on the market. Well, for that comparator drug may already have a predefined dropout rate based on what that study yielded. So if based on the literature, people who have taken this compound, this drug, in their studies, they've seen a 30% dropout rate. So as you start to design your clinical trial and you're comparing against that drug, you know, okay, if I have patients that are randomized or assigned to that comparator arm, I can now start to expect, all right, it's going to be a 30% dropout rate based on what the literature shows, based on what this company published. So you can start to kind of build in and factor that in as well. At times, adverse events, adverse effects of medications can lead towards certain dropout rates. So all of these are things that are very complex. You can appreciate it's not just one thing. There are many factors involved that can contribute to a dropout rate.
So if you take, for example, the pediatric case, why would that be a high dropout rate? And what would the underlying reasons be that would make that particular case different?
So compliance could be an issue. Compliance and also the structure of the study itself. If it's too stringent of an inclusion criteria, if you have certain parameters that are set at certain levels, for example, if a laboratory value needs to be at a certain level for inclusion, or for throughout the course of the study, and then once that trigger is hit, then they have to come off the study. They have to drop out. So predefined checkpoints in the study itself that will say yes, continue, or no, you're going to have to drop out. So that's one example. But in terms of pediatrics, what's compounded is the disease state. So what are you testing? So if it's a pediatric cancer study, that may lead towards 1 to 2 dropout rate, or if it's another type of pediatric disorder, it could be something else.
I'm going to put some pictures on the top of your videos and maybe we can stick some variables on. I was thinking in my head that you have maybe P sub n could be the number of patients that are in the study at week n, and then D sub n could be some kind of like stopping rule incorporated into a second variable that if they reach this threshold, they will now affect P sub n. So D sub n would be this second variable that tells you when to stop the first variable. So your number of patients that actually stay in the study is dependent on the second variable. Mm-hmm. That would be a good example, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So we actually have studies on student attention on videos, and it's 6 to 9 minutes is the optimal time. So I'm going to stop off here, and I'm going to put this together, and I'll share it back with you.
Great.
Is it okay to post on YouTube?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Absolutely.
Perfect. I'll share that with you. Thank you for sharing your time, and it's very interesting work you're doing. It's when you're in class, you're in class, but now like after some time after teaching, I think, where are my students going to be? And it's really cool to see where you are now.
It's my pleasure. Glad to help.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Not anymore. I was, though. She recorded me. My professor. She interviewed me. I don't know. It was like a spur of the moment thing. I'm like, yeah, sure. I think so. She wants to put me on YouTube. For her students. For her students.